When we analyze the essence of Gramscian thought, it becomes clear how Antonio Gramsci's theory of cultural hegemony extends Marxist ideology into a realm of almost absurd proportions. The concept that culture is merely a tool used by the ruling class to impose a mental dictatorship over the entire population is, at its core, deeply flawed. To inject a theory between facts and the conclusions drawn from them, rather than allowing the accumulation of facts to naturally suggest a conclusion, is in itself a form of intellectual dishonesty that discredits any theorizer. But Gramsci's theory of hegemony surpasses even the most liberal bounds of rational deceit, attempting to make us swallow as universal and constant something that is a pure and simple material impossibility. This impossibility was already inherent in the Marxist theory of class ideology, of which Gramsci's hegemony is merely an extension. If each class has an ideology that idealizes its material interests, then we are left with two options. Either each member of the class is forever bound to its ideology as if it were a second nature, or on the contrary, individuals can renounce it and adopt the ideology of another class, as Karl Marx himself believed he did. But in that case, the organic connection between class and ideology is broken, and everything becomes a matter of free choice. There is no longer any class ideology, only the ideology that each individual freely assigns to their class or another, depending on how they interpret the interests of one or the other. Gramsci aggravates the situation by declaring that the producers of ideology are not the members of each class, but the intellectual, who represent them without necessarily belonging to the class. These representatives are the organic intellectuals of the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. However, they can represent these classes without being members themselves. The connection between them and the class they represent cannot be organic in any sense. It must be a matter of free choice. Nothing prevents an intellectual from ideologically moving from the bourgeoisie to the proletariat, as Georg Lukács did, or vice versa as in the case of Erich Hofer. Moreover, who infuses the intellectuals with class ideology? For a bourgeois to train intellectuals in bourgeois ideology, he would need to master it better than his disciples. This bourgeois would then be a super-intellectual, thinker of thinkers, reducing the intellectual class to mere parrots of learned discourse. Similarly, mutatis mutandis, the organic intellectuals of the proletariat would become mere schoolboys taking lessons in Hegelian dialectics and historical materialism from professors who are bricklayers and toolmakers. These caricatural situations do not exist in reality, at least not because Gramsci himself assures us the creators of class ideologies are not the classes themselves, but the intellectual. Could not be otherwise. Translating material interests into a language of values, ideas, and theories requires considerable specialized training in philosophy and the humanities, something neither a capitalist nor a worker could acquire in their spare time. But then, neither the proletarian ideology is proletarian, nor the bourgeois one is bourgeois. Both are pure creations of intellectuals who attribute them to one class or another without needing to consult them, according to how they freely interpret the interests of each. It is no coincidence, then, that Karl Marx had already described the entire proletarian ideology before he had ever seen a proletarian up close. At best, the bourgeois and the proletarian become ideal types that exist only in the minds of intellectuals, serving as a reference for comparing real people who only resemble them distantly and schematically. Gramsci does not explicitly admit this inevitable conclusion of his theory, but slyly he draws a practical consequence from it that, for those who understand, already reveals the fallacy of the entire construction. Who creates class ideologies? The intellectuals. Who, based on this, creates hegemony, the general control of what can and cannot be thought? The intellectuals. Who leads the revolution? The intellectuals. Who takes power through revolution? The intellectuals. In the end, bourgeoisie and the proletariat are just symbols for the teams in play. Is it any wonder that in the bourgeois paradise, the bourgeois are flayed with taxes, induced to finance films and shows that demonize them, and contribute rivers of money to leftist organizations that promise to kill them? Is it any wonder that in the proletarian paradise, proletarians are subjected to slave-like working conditions, deprived of the right to strike, moved from place to place without the right to complain, policed 24 hours a day, and forced to sing praises to the supreme intellectual and guide of the peoples? In reality, it's all just a power struggle between two groups of intellectuals, each defending the interests they attribute to a class they do not belong to, and in most cases, did not consult about those interests. What is clear, although Gramsci does not say it, is that the organic intellectuals of the bourgeoisie do not intend to take their place. It is the others, proletarian intellectuals, who seek to do so. No capitalist apologist intellectual has ever been eager to leave behind his intellectual pursuits to become an industrialist or stock market speculator. Conversely, no proletarian intellectual that I know of plans to make a proletarian revolution only to continue living modestly from their work as a teacher, journalist, or scientific researcher. Taking power and exercising it to the fullest extent of their capabilities is the essence and mission of the revolutionary intellectual. What they want is not to take the place of the right-wing intellectuals, but that of the bourgeoisie. This makes it evident that in most cases, they are competing for power with a group that neither holds it nor desires it. This alone explains the structural helplessness of the conservative and liberal intellectuals in the face of the leftist advance. It has nothing to do with intellectual superiority or inferiority, but with a desire or lack of desire for power. When Mr. Lula stated that his enemies had no power perspective, he hit the nail on the head. To complete the fantasy with a touch of hallucination, Gramsci admits that not all intellectuals consciously participate in the class struggle. Some, usually the majority, are indifferent to politics and content themselves with their philosophical, scientific, or artistic pursuits without worrying about whom this might benefit in the next elections. Gramsci calls this group traditional intellectual, adding that they are neutral and apolitical only in their imagination due to false consciousness. In reality, they are unconscious servants of the status quo, just as much as the organic bourgeois intellectual. In other words, the proletarian intellectuals are in a perpetual power struggle, not only with bourgeois organic intellectuals who do not aspire to power, but with an entire intellectual community that does not even acknowledge the existence of this struggle. The cognitive consequences of this are devastating. The leftist intellectual explains all of society as an inverse projection of their own values and goals, caring little for the self-explanations that other groups and individuals might present. To him, society, history, and all human existence revolve around his group's goal, his struggle for power, which in his mind moves everything else as a dog wags its tail. He is, in short, the active factor, the creator of history, the only effective reality. The rest of humanity are shadows that move at his command. It is a horribly self-centered, solipsistic, even psychotic view that spreads easily among university students, simply because it is the most comforting neurotic compensation for their rightful sense of social uselessness. Gramsci's thought does not only inoculate its alienating and stupefying poison into militant leftists. I even think that merely admiring it a little, suspending critical judgment for a few moments, is enough for some of Gramsci's nonsense to enter and remain forever. During one of his last anti-Olivetic fits, whose reason escapes human understanding, Mr. Marco Antonio Villa, in his frantic urge to praise everything I criticize, went so far as to proclaim that the survival of democracy in post-war Italy was due to the Gramscian influence in the Italian Communist Party. It is surely the dumbest thing ever to come out of the mouth of a would-be historian. Uncontrolled anger is a sure way to humiliation. The democratic regime only survived in Italy, thanks to the crushing defeat that, against all enlightened predictions, Christian democracy of Alcide de Gasperi, mobilizing the support of the entire Catholic population in the first general election held after the fall of fascism, imposed on April 18, 1948, on the Communist Popular Front, which then gradually faded from the political scene and into the dustbin of history. If Mr. Villa would like some bibliography on the subject, I can provide it, but only if he asks nicely. Please subscribe to the channel and leave your comments. See you in the next video.